Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Ask an Adventurer. Today's first question. What percentage of your revenue comes from different income streams? So for, 10 years, 80%, 90% of my money was from giving talks at schools and 10% from schools. Then over the next years, I started doing fewer school talks, more corporate talks, and it became probably, let's say, 90% corporate talks, 10% speaking. Then I started making films and working for brands. That paid really well. So it's probably then 50% speaking, 40% films and brands, and 10% books. Now I've written more books. I'm also doing a lot less speaking. So my percentage now is probably 60% writing and 40% speaking. I would say. I would love to earn all my money from writing, but I do not do that yet, he says, with a growth mindset. Right, next question. I've recently returned from 2 years of big adventures, an awesome collection of stories, and I'd love to share them. I'm not a confident public speaker. I've actively avoided it. Do you have any advice how to get started with speaking and giving presentations about adventure? Is it irrational to be terrified of speaking to a bunch of school kids? How long did you tour around schools before charging for your talks? First thing I'd say is just because you've done cool adventures doesn't mean you have to be a motivational speaker. There does seem to be an assumption from people like me that, oh, I've done a big trip, therefore I must tell the whole world about it. Or I've done a big trip, therefore I must write a book about it. If you don't want to do talks, don't do talks. However, let's assume that you are keen to do it, but you're terrified of kids. Is that rational? Yes, absolutely. There is little in life more terrifying than giving a talk at a school when you lose the audience and they get bored and start to fidget and chat and muck around and you lose the room. It's horrible, horrible, horrible feeling. The plus side, though, is if you get good at speaking to a bunch of kids in a school, then getting paid 10 times more money to go and speak at some corporate conference is unbelievably easy. And what's also interesting is that honing and perfecting the talk you give to a load of 8-year-olds, if you go and talk to a bunch of CEOs about how to improve and motivate your life, you can say almost literally word for word what you said to the 8-year-olds, and the big corporate audience will come out and go, oh, thank you so much, that really interesting, thoughtful, carefully tailored talk. The messages are the same for everyone, so that's really helpful. I did 4 years of unpaid talks. I did probably 1,000 more or less unpaid talks before I started charging. I'm not suggesting that's what you should do because that's kind of nuts, but what I would suggest you do is do a few talks for free, just anywhere that will have you, like your local school or friends of yours who are teachers. Go and do talks for free. And there's a couple of reasons for this. You can start to work on your material to get good at doing talks. Hopefully the schools might write you a reference. They might pass you on to other schools nearby, and you can start to build up a bit of a reputation. Word of mouth is vital here. And once you feel you've done a bunch and you're adding value, then you can start to charge a tiny bit of money. And then when you get good, charge a bit more and keep charging a bit more till you meet resistance. And that's when you've worked out your current market value. So yes, start with your local school, and good luck. It is very rewarding and exhausting. What is your favourite type of tea and brand? Yorkshire tea, of course. I'd love to be a Yorkshire tea ambassador, by the way, if they're watching. Gosh. How did you manage to wangle a flight in a RAF fighter jet? Well, so going on with the last question about giving talks, the RAF got in touch and said, would you like to give a talk for us? I was like, well, that sounds cool. Please give me loads of money. And they said, oh no, we haven't got any money, but we will pay you with a ride in a fighter jet. And I was like, what, amazing. So I went all the way to Anglesey and I did a talk to the RAF there. And then in the morning, my payment, I got to go in a in a fighter jet, the ones that the Red Arrows use. It wasn't red, but the ones they use. And it was incredible. We got on the plane and they said, where do you want to go? And I said, why don't we do the three peaks? Ben Nevis, Snowdon and Scafell. So we hammered up to... we hammered off around the countryside. We didn't go to Scotland. We were going to go to Scafell in the Lake District, my mum and dad's house in the Yorkshire Dales, and then the Lake District. I can't remember why we didn't go to Scotland. Anyway, so we flew from Wales up to the Lake District, round Scafell, upside down, over the top of the highest mountain in England, over my mum and dad's house, did a carpet bombing raid on their house. My mum and dad, we could tell them the exact minute we were going to reach the house. So I told them, they were standing outside in the garden waving, and we hammered overhead and then zoomed off up into the sky. It was brilliant. Then off to Snowdon, flew around Snowdon, me waving at the tourists on the top of Snowdon. Magical. The whole thing took 50 minutes. Amazing. Afterwards, I was totally and utterly knackered. All I'd done was sit there. But I got on the train back to London, instantly fell asleep. I was just totally bushed. One thing that was really interesting, I was talking to the pilot. He was like hammering around this fighter jet, doing all this incredible, cool stuff, and we were chatting away on the headphones. And he kept talking about how he was sort of envied my life, that I was doing adventures, and he was a bit bored of his life and maybe he should do something else. And I found this so fascinating in terms of the grass always being green, that you're flying a fighter jet thinking, yeah, I'm a bit bored with life, maybe I should do something else. So I find that such an interesting thing to remember for each of us when we're starting to think, oh, maybe I should be doing something else in life. Even fighter pilots hammering around being Tom Cruise think, maybe I'm a bit bored. Crikey. How do we create a world that works, not just for the exceptionally talented, like yourself, that's what they say, not me, or the fortunate, e.g. children of the rich, and me being British, I count myself very much as the fortunate children of the rich, but for everyone, including future generations. Gosh. We have an obsession in Western countries with growth, economic growth. But unfortunately, we live on one small planet, and growth becomes at some point literally unsustainable. So as long as we define success and happiness and purpose by growth, we're just heading towards disaster and ever more inequality. And, geez, we could talk for hours and hours on this, but I'll summarize it by saying, read the book Donut Economics. It's a wonderful book about making sure that we don't have too much on the outside, but equally all those people struggling at the bottom on the inside, they get enough. So we get just the right donuts, not too much crazy growth for a few and nobody left behind. Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. Any advice for making the jump from fully employed to full-time adventurer? My advice would be overlap the two for as much as you possibly can, to keep doing your work whilst you build up an adventure CV, whilst you build up your skills in storytelling or whatever you want to do to make money from as an adventurer, while you build up an online audience who are going to be interested in what you do, and only little by little cut off the amount of hours you do for your regular employment, so that hopefully by the time you move to full-time adventuring, you have still earned enough money to live. So that would be definitely my recommendation, unless you're a millionaire, in which case send me an email. How many books do you aim to read a year? Do you reach that? Also, are you ever overwhelmed by the sheer number of books? And does it scare you that you'll never read everything you ever want to do? What a great question. How many books do I aim to read a year? I don't aim to read any particular number of books. I just read books. I tend, though, probably to read, I would guess I read 6 books a month, just because I tend to read a lot of the time. So I have a Kindle, so if I'm waiting for a train, I read my Kindle. If I'm waiting in the supermarket queue, I read my Kindle. If I'm on the toilet, I've got loads of books in the toilet. Yes, I'm always reading books. What is it? There's a follow-up bit. Oh yes, are you overwhelmed by the sheer number of books? Gosh, I really enjoy going to bookshops. I enjoy going in as a reader, looking for new books, and I love all the design and layout and stuff. But I also go into a bookshop as a writer, partly as a vanity mission to try and find my books. They're almost never there. Depressing. But I do it to look for ideas, to look for trends. And I usually come out of the bookshop then just thinking, crikey, the world really does not need me to write any more books. How the heck are my books ever going to make even a tiny wave when there's thousands of good books? So I find I go into bookshops for inspiration as an author and usually come out feeling a bit depressed, like there's no point writing any more books. And if no one ever wrote a book ever again, there are a lifetime's worth of good books to read. So you say, do I feel sad that I won't read every book? No, I don't. That's like, I don't feel sad that I won't see every place on earth. I just feel delighted that it's out there. If there's a hotel buffet, I don't feel sad that I haven't eaten the entire buffet. I feel delighted that there's so many options and this is lovely and that I can eat my fill. And the same with books. I won't read every book, but that does mean I'm ruthless about quitting bad books. So if a book's rubbish now, I quit. I quit early and I quit hard. So I quit a lot of books because there's no point. Life is too short to read bad books. On which note, please do go out and buy one of my books. They're brilliant. There are 16 available for children, for adults. Adventures, large and small. And now, lunchtime.